So welcome, everyone. We are pleased to have you join us for this webinar on finding a job with purpose during a pandemic. My name is Megan Poss, and I'm the Executive Director of Leading Change. And there's a few people on the line that this is your first touch point with Leading Change. And we, along with the Globe Series, who are graciously hosting today's webinar, work in a constellation model with two other organizations, the Delphi Group and the Excel Partnership. And we all have our own respective missions, but we share a common vision, and that vision is a sustainable, prosperous, and socially just future within a generation. Living in a world that is sustainable and socially just includes acting in a decolonial manner and building and sustaining relationships with Indigenous peoples. And while we're all uprooted and convening in digital spaces, it's still really important to ground ourselves in acknowledging the various territories we're situated on. We have participants from across what is now called Canada and a number of international folks who are joining us as well, which is great. So if you know the land or treaty you're situated on, please feel free to type it in the chat box and take a moment to give thanks to the original stewards of the land. For example, I'm calling in from Tiohtià:ke or Montreal, the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. If you don't know much about the land you're currently on, we encourage you to use this time while we're in a collective moment of reflection and resetting to educate yourself. And we'll actually be sharing a few resources after this call in a post-webinar email to help get you started. So on to a few housekeeping items. And speaking of learning and educating ourselves, that's what today's webinar is all about. We'll be hearing stories and different perspectives on career planning and job search strategies. Leading Change has an extensive network, and evidently not all of them are on this call. So if you don't see yourself reflected in this panel today, drop us a line and we'd be happy to see how we can either answer some specific questions or feature different voices in our upcoming programs. Okay, looks like some folks have already kind of familiarized themselves with the chat box. We encourage you to use it, interact with each other. This is where you'll also want to put your questions and comments right to all participants in the chat so everyone can see. And if you do experience any technical questions, you can also put them in the chat there, and my lovely colleague Peter will support you with any tech challenges that you have. As for the format, we'll be having a dialogue with our panelists for the first 30 to 40 minutes or so, and then we want you to get into your questions. So that's where you'll feel free at any point in time to put your questions into the chat box. We'll try and get to them at the end. And we are recording this session, so for anyone that needs to drop out early, this will be made available afterwards. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome our panelists, and I've done enough talking here, so we'll have them introduce themselves. And Naman, let's start with you. Naman, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Of course, I was on mute. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naman Anwar. I'm currently slightly away from sustainability, leading a technology project management office at an electricity utility in Alberta. The crown jewel of my career was the 50% emissions reduction work that I delivered with the oil and gas regulator in Alberta. And that program is supposed to deliver 10% of Canada's Paris commitments. My education includes an MBA in Energy and Sustainable Development, a BSc in Computer Science, and an executive certificate from Harvard on energy and climate policy development. That's me.
Great. Sarah, how about you go next?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Applebaum. I am originally from Toronto, based in Vancouver, an alumni of Leading Change from 2012, I believe. And I sit sort of in the sustainability world and have a foot firmly planted in the innovation space as well. I work with a venture capital firm investing in sustainability startups, both clean tech and climate tech in Canada and the US. But then I also work with the University of British Columbia in their incubator and accelerator program, entrepreneurship at UBC, as one of our executives in residence.
Great. Lara, you're next.
Awesome. My name is Laura. I'm originally from Colombia, but been living in Montreal. It's going to be 5 years now. Currently jumping in my first full-time sustainability job as sustainability officer at Delmar. I started in January, and then after the pandemic started, so I guess I have a lot of insights to share on how to live through this, but really excited. I'm also part of different volunteering initiatives like the Global Shapers for the World Economic Forum, the Climate Reality, and of course, I'm a leading change delegate.
Wonderful. And Corey.
Hey, everyone. So my name is Corey. I'm Mi'kmaq from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Studied business at St. Mary's, a few different environmental and energy certificates out of Toronto. I'm a leading change alum. And I work for a yield co, a renewable energy yield co. So whenever it's windy, my turbines are spinning. So I always like windy days.
Great. And finally, last but not least, we have brought in someone to weigh in with their knowledge and expertise in career strategy and career planning. So Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Catherine Stace, and I'm a career strategist with the Maxwell School of Public Policy, and I sit on the national board of the Canadian Association of Career Educators and Employers.
Wonderful. So we're going to dive into our first question. And for many people on this call, there's obviously been something that's been ignited in them, whether that's a burning passion or sustainability is a new interest. And I always find that it's fascinating and often beneficial to hear the origin stories behind people's purpose and motivation for pursuing a career in sustainability. So for our panelists, we'll have you tell us a little bit about the catalyst that set you in motion towards pursuing a career in this area. And looking at my list, we're going to start with Corey.
Awesome. So my catalyst story is a little embarrassing, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So growing up in beautiful Halifax, you know, everyone has a sailboat here. So my father had a wind turbine and an old solar panel on the sailboat, and it was old. So the sailboat, you know, it got holes. You don't use it, but he moved the solar panels and wind turbines, and he retrofitted it onto the house. So when I was growing up, I believed that we lived in a world that was run by renewable energy. So I felt what the future feels like, and most of my life I try to do everything I can to get this feeling of what I had when I was younger. So it was a bit of a mistake for me to believe it, but yeah, that's my catalyst story.
Wonderful. And I'm guessing here kind of that interest in wind and renewables is still kind of, you know, what's fueling your passion and bringing purpose to, you know, all of the, you know, various roles that you play right now.
Certainly, absolutely.
Great. So next up, Laura, do you want to share your catalyst story for getting interested in sustainability?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, that catalyst moment goes back 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I decided to move to Boston with the idea just to learn English. But when I moved to Boston, I was shocked by the consumption patterns, how different they were from back in Colombia. So there was a lot of ways I was having these part-time jobs while I was doing my English classes in restaurants, and the amount of food waste was just insane. So I'm an engineer. I had worked before in the logistics industry, so I thought that had to be a logistics problem, and it had to do with, you know, the way things were packed, and I just became obsessed with solving this problem. And I didn't know this was a field. I didn't know there was a terminology for circular economy, and I didn't know about sustainability. But, you know, being in the city with the best universities in the world, I say, you know what, let me just find something. There must be an academic path that could help me solve this issue. So a friend of mine recommended me a class in Harvard University through the Harvard Extension School called Life Cycle Assessment and Sustainability and Sustainable Supply Chains. So I thought that's perfect. An engineer working in logistics, what's best that, you know, life cycle assessment and sustainable supply chains. So after that, I took that class. I was, of course, feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, there's these people going to Harvard. They probably know more than me. But then I realized we were all in the same boat. No one knew anything. And after that, I realized there's actually sustainability. It's a field of study. There was a master's in that field. And I kind of just dive and jump into it. And I started my master's in sustainability. I graduated today after 5 years of extension school, taking one class at a time. No longer obsessed with the circular economy problem. I think I transition a bit more towards corporate sustainability, but I'll share that story probably later. But yeah, that's how I started.
Amazing. And Naman, I think you kind of have, an almost sort of parallel story to Laura's to share.
That's true. So mine is very similar to Laura's. For me, growing up in Saudi Arabia and visiting Pakistan was where my parents were from, showed me the stark contrast in different societies. On one hand, in Saudi Arabia, there was plenty of food, water, clean air, and yet folks wasted it a lot. On the other hand, when I visited Pakistan, I would see poverty of resources, lack of clean air, water, and basic levels of electricity. So that's what got me started on looking into resource consumption and eventually led me to do my MBA in sustainable development. But it all started with just looking at the stark contrast between the different societies.
And next, we've got Sarah.
Yeah, so I don't have as specific or defining an experience or a moment as Naman or Laura described. It's always been sustainability in the environment, part of my core values. As a kid, our summer holidays were always canoe camping in Algonquin Park, so always sort of felt very close to nature. And then followed that in an education pathway. I studied environmental science in my undergrad. My MBA had a focus on sustainability as well, and so I was really just aligning my career with my personal values.
Wonderful. Well, I know, at least for myself, I appreciated hearing all of those interesting origin stories. And for this next one, we're going to take a little bit of a darker turn, knowing this is a tough time for a lot of young people, including some folks that might be on the call, due to the bearing the brunt of the COVID-19 labor market fallout. And leaning into potentially uncomfortable conversations is kind of our hallmark at Leading Change. So I'd love if you could share with us a little bit more of a low point in your professional journey. And then also, what were some of the strategies or actions that you took to pull through to the other side? And for this one, we'll start with Laura.
Okay, so I guess for me, and I like stories, so I'm just sharing that story. So this one is called Immigration Round Number 2. So for me, a challenging time in my career in sustainability was deciding to move to Montreal. So having already started my master's degree, having, gotten English as best as I could, right? I thought, okay, now there we go, Montreal, I'm ready. I had set my mind, I wanted a job in sustainability. So when I came to Montreal, I started to do things that I still recommend. I started to volunteer a lot with organizations that align with my values. I started to work with an organization working on circular economy for the textile industry and helping women with sustainability businesses. So, but I was doing too much. So at that point, I had also paused my classes. I decided to jump back and take 2 of my master's classes online. So I took a lot. I was doing a lot. And at some point, I encourage everyone to also take care of your mental health. At some point, I wasn't able to do everything. I had to, little by little, I saw how everything was getting destroyed. Little by little, I had to withdraw my classes. I had to quit the dream job that I had in my mind. I also had put a lot of pressure because I guess when you find that dream job, you feel that you cannot let down your boss, you cannot let yourself down. So for me, I was working so hard and putting so much pressure even on weekends. So at the end of the day, I had quit the job and nothing happened. I had to go back to Colombia, take 3 months of break. But then when I came back, and I think that's the point the experience I want to share with you all, even though I had that low point, when I came back, I realized, okay, what am I good at? I have this corporate background. I had worked with organizations like DHL, and big other, corporate organizations, and this logistics background. So I decided to jump back into logistics. I found a job at UPS, nothing to do with sustainability, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to focus on my professional life. I finished my degree while being a sales representative at UPS, but then something happened and I decided, you know, my values are always with me. So I decided to start being myself, and I started a grassroots sustainability program at UPS. We started to do, you know, getting together, doing activities for the building, and that throughout the way that led me to actually be part of the sustainability steering committee for UPS in Canada, where only vice presidents used to sit at, and there was me, this lady, working in sales, representing sustainability for a big corporation. I got to work also with the head, the corporate sustainability office for my thesis, and that just not being my job. So I encourage everyone to try to do the best from the situations that they're at. And then thanks to that unofficial experience in the logistics industry, I was able then to land this job as a sustainability officer for a logistics company.
Wonderful. Sarah, do you want to share your story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my low point in my sustainability journey was really at the start of my career. I graduated from my undergrad in 2008, was super excited to have a university degree and start my career, but that was not a great time to be looking for a job in the middle of the global financial crisis, and really struggled to find work, needed to move back home and move in with my parents for a little bit, and had to really reset my expectations around what my first job out of university would look like, what sector I would be able to work in, and not compromise my own sort of personal values around my career in an organization that I wanted to work with, but at least look at the sector that I would be working in, the function I would have within an organization, and maybe move away from a sustainability-focused career to think more about what are the skills I need to build in the long term to end up working in sustainability and clean tech and climate impact.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Naman, do you want to share a story with us?
Yeah, definitely. I think mine is kind of similar to Sarah's in this case. My low point that I would discuss is when I was leaving Deloitte. Here I had thought that, I was getting into one of the big 4 firms. I would make my way slowly into sustainable consulting and work on big international projects. But then Deloitte's sustainability practice was 1 person in Calgary. And this was after the 2008 crisis, and there was just not enough work on sustainability front within Calgary. And Deloitte wanted me to be billable on technology projects, and I was like, hang on, I didn't come here for this. So it was a bit of a thing where I had to make a decision on, am I going to get siloed as a technology consultant, or do I want to try and branch out a little bit? So I parted ways with Deloitte at that time, and I was disappointed that I could not capitalize on this great opportunity to be able to work with a big 4 and somehow or the other make my way into the sustainability consulting. And when I left for of all the places, wait for it, of all the places, it was SNC Lavalin that I went to, and this was just before all the scandals broke. So in hindsight, it was not the best of choices, as eventually the division that I worked for SNC got shut down. But that's a story for another day. How did I recover? I guess I realized that I still needed to move in the right circles, explore the right kind of opportunities, and it was around that time that I got involved in the in CEP, which is Connecting Environmental Professionals. And I see Elliot's actually one of the attendees, and he was the one who introduced me to it in the first place. So the CEP as well as Leading Change is what brought me back into the sustainability sphere, and eventually helped me get to the position where I was able to work on a dream project, the one that I mentioned about 50% emissions reduction. So yeah, that was my journey in that case after a bit of a dark time, I would say.
Well, I'm of course happy to hear that, well, you made it through, and then also, yeah, the Leading Change community helped support you during that tough time. And finally, Corey, if you want to weigh in with a story.
Certainly. So definitely a low point in my career is soon after my undergrad, I kind of faked it till I made it, got myself into a job that I was nowhere qualified enough for. And a big portion of this job was making a lot of reports, was reading and writing a lot, and I am not someone who enjoys to read or write. But I kind of faked myself into this job, so it was good pay. It was something I was really passionate about, but because I didn't have the skills that I needed, I was struggling all the time. It was an uncomfortable workplace, and eventually they fired me because I wasn't very good, and that was such a low point in my career because I felt defeated, and I felt that, you know, I don't have the skills to do, because at the time it was a job that I really enjoyed. So I did a lot of self-reflect, and I said, okay, you know, what am I good at? What do I need to improve upon? And I believed in the mantra of, you know, try not to be a generalist, try to master what you're good at and then cut the fat. But reading and writing is, of course, something that everyone needs. So I did take some writing classes, and it was something that I had to improve upon, but it was a low point. Getting fired sucks.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, glad to hear that you took the approach of a lot of self-reflection and honest self-assessment. So we've heard some stories here, and I'd love to kind of bring Catherine in to, you know, weigh in on, you know, what you're hearing in terms of the strategies that all of these people took, and if there are any kind of you know, additional tips or tricks that you can kind of complement based on your experience as a career strategist.
Sure, perfect. So some of the things I'm going to talk about is a little bit of what we heard in some of the stories, and I think they're really important things to think about is reflecting on your current situation and who you are, taking an inventory of the things that you're being involved with and what makes you happy or fulfills a certain requirement that makes you feel good about yourself. At the same time, sometimes we need to reset our expectations based on what's happening currently. And that means that, not that I want your dream to disappear, but that you can maybe just inch a little slower towards it by involving yourself. And I think that's a really big one, is involve yourself in something. And whether that's volunteer and you have a survival job, you know, board experience is always amazing for future career building. And then taking the opportunity to tackle an area that you're not super comfortable with. The way Corey said, you know, reading and writing wasn't his thing, and so he took some time to tackle that. So think about an area that you need to improve upon. I think the most important thing is that you move forward. If you just sit back and don't do anything, and I think I will allow you one day to do that, but after that, you need to do something each day. And whether that something is something small or something big, that's up to you, but one thing to move forward each day.
Great advice. And we're actually on our final question here before we open it up to audience questions. So encourage everyone in the chat, if you've got a question for our panelists, start to type it in there, and then that's what we'll be getting to next. We're going to do kind of lightning round with each of our panelists, sharing with us their top 3 tips or actions that they recommend any young person who's maybe looking for a job right now should consider. And Naman, we're gonna start with your top 3 tips.
For sure, yeah. The first one I would mention is that chase your passion. So if you're passionate enough and others can see your genuine interest and passion, it will open doors for you. If you're not passionate about it, people will realize that. You yourself would realize that at some point as well, and it's not going to serve you well in the long run. So I know some would say as to, you know, that's a very bookish thing as to chase your passion. In my career, I've seen that yield results. You have to be patient, and eventually you do get what you're looking for. The second one is don't simply chase certifications. Sustainability is still in its nascency and evolving quite rapidly. Certifications, diplomas, degrees, they can be really useful to have under your belt, but your ability to speak with an informed perspective, especially on evolving events and industry trends, can really set you apart. So the more data, the more information you have, the stronger your personal brand is going to be that you can then sell to the high, you know, for the right kind of a job. So the last one is don't network. Don't just network. Be a part of a community or build a community. Connections need to be genuine and two-way. You can help someone by even, you know, just finding a hockey league for their daughter that they might be looking for. So it's not that it's always that you're looking for something from them, but there could be, you know, somebody could be looking for a good restaurant or an interesting article. So it doesn't need to be that you're always on the lookout for somebody to help you out, but try and see and pick up on what they might be in need of as well, and try and serve their needs. The more you do that, the more you're starting to build your community. I've made 6 switches in my whole career, and all of my jobs have been through the community that I've built. So that's why I'm in a way a poster child of, do it the right way, and it will yield results for you in the long run.
Wonderful. Those are great tips, Naman. Sarah, can you share some pearls of wisdom with us?
Perfect. Before I do that, though, I just want to high five Naman on his recommendations. Choose your passion. That was something that I was guided with when I was doing my MBA. One of my mentors said, Sarah, figure out what it is that you love and go chase that, and success and money will take care of itself. And so that's been sort of a guiding light. And the networking piece, especially for folks who are early in their career and don't necessarily, think they have anything they can offer, the best question you can always ask is, what can I do for you? How can I help you? I just want to park that there, and then I'll dive into my 3 recommendations. The first for right now in sort of post-COVID and current COVID times is do some of the legwork for your target employer. There's a lot of grant money and funding right now for small and medium organizations especially, so companies that are less than 500 employees, specifically around hiring students, recent graduates, and young people under 30. If you fall into this category, make sure you do some research and know what funding they would be eligible for if they hire you. Familiarize yourself with that application process and offer your employer to help them apply for it, or your target employer to help them apply for it. So if you come with money, that's super attractive. Second, and I think this is something we talked about in challenges, be flexible on what type of job and employment you're looking for. Be open to different roles, functions, sectors. If you can't work in your target sector or with your target company, think about what your own core values are, skills you want to build and develop, and what types of jobs will allow you to do that. So when the market and the job market changes, you can move into that dream position. I'd also suggest widening your search. Look outside of your current city or region. In the last 8 to 10 weeks, the world has figured out how to work remotely. We didn't think we could do it. We thought it was really hard, but everyone has learned how to work on Zoom. And so I see a lot of companies now, especially in the technology and innovation space, actually choosing to be remote first and giving up their headquarters. And so there might be opportunities with companies that are super cool, that have really exciting jobs for young people who are just starting their career, and they're open and willing to consider remote employees.
Those are all fantastic tips. Corey, what advice do you have for young people during this time?
Absolutely. So I agree with everyone that has already spoke, though I will twist Numan a little bit with the networking. It's always great to build really important networks when you do, but also I would argue that it's not always a bad thing just to go and to be seen. Many networking events, when I was living in Toronto, I would go to almost 3 every week, just to be in the space, to be seen, just to meet people, even if the conversations are only surface deep. You're being an active participant in the space, and it goes back to his point about being a part of the community. Another big one is having a good mentor, and I'm going to pick on my old manager who's actually on this call, Phil. Phil is a huge mentor of mine, and it's always really great to have mentors. And it's kind of strange finding them. It's almost kind of like asking them to be your life partner. And it can sometimes be quite an emotional ride. I have leaned on Phil on this, who's a part of this in this meeting, many times, and many of my other mentors. And I often will call them up. Phil and I went out for dinner one day and just chatted. And mentors are people who've gone through these things. They've gone through problems. They've had their own failures. They've had their own successes. And you can really save time and save a lot of pain by leveraging and leaning on these mentors, especially at a time like now.
Great advice there, Corey. I know for myself, mentors have played a huge role in my life. And they don't always need to be very senior people that are older than you. I find, you know, I've got peers and people that are younger than me that, you know, teach me things and inspire me in different ways. So Lara, let's hear your top 3 tips.
Yeah, of course. So I think for me, one tip will be, don't wait for the right space or the right time to actually start. For me, I was always waiting to have a degree, or I was waiting to get the right job, or I was waiting to move to another country, always waiting. But then I realized that there's always a space to live your passion. So be always an ambassador of your passion, and doors will start to open. And I think that was an example that happened to me at UPS, where I was working as a sales representative, but just starting, I decided, you know, let me just start. Let me actually start a sustainability committee, see who's interested. We started to do trainings, conversations, and all that actually flourished and made me an expert within my own community. So don't wait for the right time, but I would, with that, will also add, enjoy the process and avoid instant gratification. I guess in, you know, as millennials, we see people having success, and we always say, I want to be there, but I want to be there now. And I think that brought a lot of anxiety to me, and that, you know, I think was the reason why I got, you know, this mental health breakdown, is because I wanted to be there right now at that moment. But then I realized I need to just enjoy the process. I'll get there whenever I have to get there, but just enjoying the process and doing one thing at a time. So if you decide to focus in school, get your credentials, get them, and, you know, slowly you'll get where you want to get. And I think another one that I want to leave people with is try to surround yourself with like-minded people. So that happened to me as well, because for a long time, I wasn't in sustainability, but I was missing that, you know, that sense of purpose in my community. So I decided to join groups like Leading Change, groups like the Global Shapers, groups like the Climate Reality, so volunteer groups that I could be part of these conversations. I used to join webinars that would inspire me and give me tips. So I think that's really important, because as Newman was saying, a lot of the jobs and the opportunities usually come from the people you know, and it also allows you to take action. So if you, in your day job, you don't have the opportunity to take action, through a volunteer group, you can get the experience and the action you want to take. And I think the last one that I have is really technical. With sustainability, it's such an evolving topic. Try to be always curious. And I would recommend using your LinkedIn or the newsletter subscriptions that you have as a curated list as a toolbox of resources for sustainability. So that's what I do by myself. I follow strategic people. I follow certain groups, newsletters. So in the morning, LinkedIn for me is my toolbox of like, okay, what's going on in sustainability, and I kind of save items that I want to review later, and that will help you get inspired. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. I've reached out to people that I you know, crazy leaders that I want to be like them, just to ask for advice or connect, or just follow them if they don't accept your connection. So I think those will be my 2 tips.
Those are great tips. And finally, Catherine, if you don't mind kind of wrapping up this portion of the conversation with your top 3 actions or recommendations for young people.
Absolutely. So I'm going to say, if your resume is the one that your high school guidance counselor told you how to write, throw it away and start from scratch. This is your opportunity to really put some thought into that application, and someone's making a decision on whether they're going to take you based on this piece of paper. So the same thing goes for your cover letter, LinkedIn or other relevant social media profiles, and take this opportunity to work on your interview skills. Lots of people, lots of HR people are offering to help people on LinkedIn, help people through Zoom with their interview skills. Another thing I'm going to mention is researching organizations. We all have target organizations we love, but I bet there's probably 100 other organizations that you'll love too. So I want you to just go outside your comfort zone, research who is doing what across the world. Don't limit yourself, because right now we realize we don't need to be in the same place to do that job. And then my last thing, again, is I'm going to talk about taking care of yourself, because I think that's probably the most important thing. The message right now is always upskill, 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 but it's good to acknowledge it's exhausting to do everything online. And we weren't expecting this to happen, and it's tiring. And if you can't upskill, that's okay.
Wonderful. Those are all such great tips. And for anyone that may have been kind of furiously trying to write them down, as I mentioned, we will have a recording of this webinar afterwards for you to rewatch. And we will also be sending out a post-webinar email to everyone next week summarizing all of these great tips that our speakers have provided. So we're going to get to some audience questions. And there's some great questions that are coming in, and we also got some fantastic questions through the registration process, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. I'm going to start with this first one from Ina. For anyone on the panel maybe that's had a governance or board director experience. And that question is if there's any suggestions for how to go about finding and joining a board that aligns with your values. I may kind of pick on people and then others can pop in, but I feel like, Corey, this is maybe a question that, that you'll have some insight on.
Absolutely. So currently I sit on 2 boards, and I think I'm taking another board position. So right now I'm underemployed due to COVID. So I have some board positions, and, you know, as mentioned, it's really great development. The best way to get onto a board is find out who's currently already on a board. The board nomination process takes a little bit of time. It's exhausting. We have to do interviews, and we have to do look at resumes, and most people, I included, are doing a board position on the side. It's a, you know, our side hustle. So if you can connect with me or connect with someone else on a board, you know, go for a coffee, a beer, you know, chat, learn more about their board position. Chances are during their next AGM, they'll usually bring people on, and boards have a term of how long they can stay. So they're always looking for people. It may not be this year, but maybe it's next year. So stay in touch with those people, and just research when their board term is, and I guarantee you'll work out fine. And they're always looking for people that don't look like their organization. There's probably a better way to put that. But me myself, I'm a youth and I'm Indigenous, so I fit well with some boards. But maybe if the organization serves youth and if you're an older person, well, then that board might do well because it's all about diversity and trying to pull in people from different backgrounds.
Great answer. Is there anyone else? Anyone else that wants to chime in? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. So I assume we're talking about not-for-profit boards. If the question was geared to private boards or for-profit boards of private companies, send me a message directly and I can give you some feedback. But the other thing I'll say about not-for-profit boards is check with your local Board of Trade. I know the Vancouver Board of Trade has a young professional stream, and they host an event once a year where they bring in a bunch of not-for-profit organizations that are specifically looking to add young professionals to their board for that diversity of thought. So get involved there. That could be a great opportunity. And also start with volunteering with an organization. Many not-for-profits are somewhat hesitant about bringing in total unknowns to their board if they're not already involved in the organization as a volunteer, as a donor, or otherwise engaged in some level of programming. So be familiar with that aspect of the organization as well.
Wonderful. Is there anyone else on the call that would like to weigh in with kind of governance or steering committee or board opportunities that they've taken on? Naman, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about kind of your experience being on the steering committee for leading change?
I was trying to get myself again off of mute here, but yes, definitely. I think the experience of leading change, I 100% agree with Sarah on that, as to organizations at times are a bit hesitant to just get somebody directly brought onto a board. They'd like to see as to who you are. The best way and the easiest way to do that is to volunteer through them. The leading change board thing didn't happen for me overnight. I was a delegate twice before I expressed my interest towards the board. And of course, I had interactions with the previous board members, Elliot again being one of them. So I had quite a bit of interactions with the board members. And then when I expressed interest, I guess the application was seen as probably in a better light as opposed to if I was coming in cold without having any history with that organization at all. It does open a lot of doors. Once you are on a board, it does open doors. But remember, again, it's a community. You can't always be taking and not giving in. You have to contribute. And the more you contribute, the more you'd realize that and that's going to give you back in return. So like I said, one of my dream jobs kind of happened because of leading change. I literally practiced my interview questions at 2016 leading change. That's what I did. That I was thinking about, okay, I'll probably get asked this, I'll probably get asked that. It all happened because of leading change in that instance. But again, the more you put in, the more you will be able to get out, and without even needing to ask for it at times.
I'm going to build a little bit on what Nguyen said, because if you're still in school, there's lots of committees or student government that you can join. And then once you've graduated, your institution would love it if you came back and joined one of their alumni committees. And a lot of them do some really great work helping current students in difficult times.
That is a fantastic point, Catherine. I know that I was fortunate enough to be able to do lots of student extracurriculars when I was in school, and it really can set you up for understanding the basics of governance and agenda planning and due diligence. Fantastic responses from our panelists. Thank you. So we're going to take a question from Marcel. And they're curious to know, what sectors do you see being still committed to investing in sustainability jobs amid COVID and uncertainty on the directions of recovery? So if there's anyone, if there's anyone that kind of wants to weigh in on sort of what they're seeing in terms of some industry trends, or what they're seeing or hearing in terms of organizations that are actually looking to hire at this time.
Definitely. I had the great opportunity, kind of a mind-blowing opportunity, to attend the World Economic Forum in January this year. And it was all before the COVID crisis hit us all. But everyone over there, from C-suite executives to government officials, were talking about ESG reporting and how investors are demanding more and more transparency, and they're really struggling with what they're seeing right now. So if the leaders and of the corporate and the political world are talking about something, it's time to pay attention. Despite COVID, there are still dozens of jobs that have been posted for ESG analysts and reporting in Canada. And I feel, just looking at where the trend's going, that ESG reporting and audit jobs will grow significantly and are a great way to get into the sustainability sector and learn about what's going on in the sustainability world within these companies. So there's a couple of other folks that had asked questions about how to get in, into the sustainability world. Reporting is a great way. Maybe you have some technical skills, whether you were an engineer or otherwise, that could be used for ESG, being an ESG reporting analyst. You could try and bridge that gap through a certification or through, again, showing enough research or analysis done on your own time to be able to slowly make your way in as an analyst and then grow from there. So that'd be, I'd say, one space where I'm still seeing that recruitment's happening. Companies still want to report and report better because investors are demanding that more and more every day. Especially in post-COVID situation, there's going to be a significant pivot shift, and what we will see is this sector will kind of continue to grow significantly in the coming years.
Wonderful. Anyone else on the line that wants to kind of weigh in on sort of what they're seeing or observing in their circles?
I'll say something.
I think I would like to.
Oh, hold on. We've got a little bit of crosstalk here. Let's maybe start with Catherine, and then Laura, we'll get to you.
Okay. So climate change hasn't gone away. We're just not thinking about it, or some people just are not thinking about it as much. But what's happening with the COVID situation is everyone is coming up with a recovery plan. They have to rethink how they're doing it. This is an opportunity for you to tell them in your rethink, this is what you need to include. Might as well do one plan instead of coming up with another plan once things get back together to address climate change issues. So this is a time for you to look at organizations that actually do a proposal. Forget about cover letter, don't apply for a job. Tell them what you can do to help them in their recovery plan and make it more sustainable.
Yeah, and I think in an earlier thread, just to, quickly before we get to Laura, Sarah, you had kind of brought up that tip that this is actually kind of a good time to be looking at resources that are out there. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Let me find some links and put them in the chat maybe, or I'll send them to you afterwards, but there's the Canada Summer Jobs program that's been fully funded. There's a lot of funding going into MyTax to help businesses hire students, and so where there was maybe a 25 or 50% match, sometimes we're seeing that as much as 75%, where they'll match the contribution a company makes to hiring somebody. But I'll send some links around to you, Megan, afterwards, and you can circulate them.
Yeah, wonderful, thanks. And Laura, you had some things that you wanted to share.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's just building on Newman's point. I think all companies are now preparing for this recovery plan, and I think, for example, in Canada now, large companies that want to benefit from the help the government is giving, they have to report on climate science. They have to build something called TCFD, which is the Task Force for Financial Climate-Related Reporting. So I think that's a great opportunity to look for public-private companies, because those are the ones that have the biggest reporting, stresses that investors are asking for. So you could start your looking there. But I would also say, this is an opportunity to keep yourself informed, because everyone is kind of pausing for a little bit. So whenever we come back, you're ready with the tools that you need. So I would say reporting is a big one. Policy making is a big one. People are looking advice on how to build policies, both internally but also for governments. We have seen the city of Amsterdam taking this, new approach to rebuilding, something called downturn economics, which is a sustainable development framework to economic recovery. I think be on the lookout to what's happening, and try to, even some readings could help you on an interview. You don't need to have a certification to position yourself, but at least just being informed. But I agree with everyone. This recovery represents a great opportunity.
Wonderful. Thanks, Laura. So we have a question here from Michelle that I don't want to miss. She'd like to know, how can a neurodiverse youth thrive during this time? And I think what might be helpful, especially for panelists don't share that identity. We all come with our own intersections of identity and spaces where we have more or less privilege. So if there's anyone on the line that feels comfortable sort of sharing either some of the strategies or coping mechanisms or things that they've done in relation to their identity. Or perhaps I can also ask, Catherine, you see lots of different students with lots of different, experiences and things that they come with. Do you have any suggestions or tips that you typically provide students that you work with?
Absolutely. So neurodiversity is actually really common with everyone. And I'm going to say that one of the things that's really important is to understand the strengths that you can pull from it, because every industry and every job is looking for a different skill set. So if you are someone who is very introverted, social anxiety disorders, anything like that, there's lots of opportunities for you out there. You just probably won't be the salesperson, right? So you need to kind of dig into that, and how can you play that as a strength? So there are different opportunities, and I want to say the IT sector oftentimes in Silicon Valley is one of those areas where those skills can be very important that you can pull from it. But understanding your strengths and what you're contributing, I think, is the biggest hurdle at this moment.
I'm going to jump in and piggyback on that. One thing that I love to do at interviews, I'll do a bit of research to see if an organization hires a certain demographic. So myself as an Indigenous person, and if I kind of scope out the company and I see, okay, I don't think that they have anyone Indigenous hired onto that company, when I have the interview, I'll ask at the very end they say, do you have any questions for us? And I'll always ask, please tell me about your guys' hiring policies or HR policies for Indigenous people. And they'll kind of look there at you kind of stunned and a little terrified to tell you that maybe they don't have it. And then you kind of give them the idea, well, maybe you should be hiring people in my demographic. So you can kind of use it as a strategy. It's worked quite well for me in the past.
And I think I'll just complement to Corey's point. I think for me, I didn't realize, when I went through a mental health situation, I kind of, that imparted me after that. And I've been using it also not only in interviews, but I've been using it throughout my practice. I'm always really aware of asking questions. What support systems does the company have? Now that I'm in charge of the sustainability practice, that's something that I want to incorporate, mental health. But I think I also has taught me how to work better. I know when to stop. I know what to do and when to push myself a little far. But I think it's really great that you bring that question forward to your employer in the interview process. And even as you learn, that could be your expertise. And that's how you can differentiate yourself. If you're looking into certifications, you can look at the, intersections of mental health and sustainability or neurodiverse representation within the practice. You can start something. So I always try to find the opportunities within these little points that make you unique.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And Corey, that is definitely a wonderful question that you ask. From my viewpoint, I'd say I didn't grow up in Canada. A visible minority. I moved here from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And when I look back, I try and leverage those weaknesses. Potentially, those could be considered as weaknesses of not being a local Canadian into strengths. And how I do that is, example is during my interview questions, I try and find those opportunities. How did I overcome those challenges and then convert that into my interview responses? Whatever those challenges were that are based off my identity, how did I overcome them? Overcame those and then shared those through the interview process to help them understand that, no challenge is big enough for me. If I can, move on my own all the way to Canada and build a life over here, then, these problems that you're going through, these are going to be a piece of cake for me, hypothetically, and be able to deal with that much more easily as opposed to somebody who might not be able to overcome such challenges in their personal life. So try and see if you can convert some of those weaknesses into strengths.
Gosh, everyone, those were great recommendations and suggestions and insight there. Thank you so much. I think we're going to try and slip in 2 more questions. So I'm going to ask our panelists to please be succinct, and I might kind of limit it to 1 or 2 of you. We have a question from Kristen here. What advice do you have for someone trying to transition their skills to a new industry or field at this time during COVID-19? I'll kind of pause for a little bit of reflection, and if there's someone, 1 or 2 people that want to jump in with their suggestions for what people can be maybe doing during this time.
Yeah, I might jump in, Megan, really quick. I wouldn't think about going into a new industry or sector any differently during COVID than you would have previously, and it's thinking about what skills, expertise, and experiences you've learned in your current roles that would be transferable to a new sector.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in with some thoughts on this one?
I'll echo what Sarah said. Sarah said it's absolutely your transferable skills. And you just need to make the case. The question is, why are you leaving that industry? You just need to have a reason why.
Wonderful. And so we're gonna end on this final question that I really like from Karine. And I'll maybe ask our each of our panelists to weigh in quickly, kind of with any advice they have to provide. And that's if you've got any tips for staying mentally healthy and as much as yourself as possible while job searching, especially given the particular circumstances.
I can jump on that quickly. So when I had this moment that I had to go back to Colombia and then come back and reset everything, I did 250 applications through LinkedIn. And the way I stayed healthy was just scheduling some time in the day. So I found a part-time job working at an H&M store. It was challenging, coming back, and I thought I had different ideas, but then I had my job during the day, but then I scheduled some time to do job searching. and then attending networking events, but taking it seriously, as Catherine was saying, just working in my CV, and I think taking also breaks is really important. So in the weekends, I didn't do any job searching. So I think having a nice schedule and breaks built into it is really helpful.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to weigh in with a tip around mental health?
I can definitely weigh in on this. I think having a personal release system is really important as to if you're stressed out, what's the way that you're going to release all that stress. For me, it was playing squash pre-COVID, and I would do that quite often so that, I can feel that, A, I'm paying attention on my physical health. At the same time, it's a bit of a release, all that stress, all that, tension that might be building up. And then the second thing is that you have to think about how to, at the same time, what do you enjoy? If you enjoy reading books, if you enjoy seeing videos, maybe try and couple that with learning about the sustainability sector or anything specific in that. Try and pivot that interest or passion that you have towards something that is sustainability related, and just use this as a learning opportunity while we are going through this crisis.
And Sarah, Corey, or Catherine, do you have any tips to leave us with?
Yeah, I can jump in, Megan. So two things. One, focus on self-care, build a routine. If it's, block off an hour in your calendar every day to make sure you eat lunch or do a yoga, or, go walk around the block and get some fresh air. Taking time for your mental health and physical well-being is super important, especially during these times. And if you are not working right now and thinking about, what comes next, as Naman said, think about self-improvement. What can you learn? What skills can you develop? What books can you read? Podcasts you can listen to that will help advance your thinking and your knowledge base in your target sector and field. Think about this as a real opportunity to focus on you and your personal development.
I'm going to add.
I would like to add.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry. I'm going to add one last little bit. Is that school and work gave us some structure for our day, and that structure has disappeared. So we want to maybe go back and create our own structure. You can't go to the gym anymore. What's another way that you can do it? You can't see your friends in person. What's another way that we can do it? It's really easy to sit there and watch Netflix all day. So this is your chance to shake things up and do things a little bit differently to get through this situation.
Yeah, and I think the last little point I wanted to add, I see a lot of people on the chat talking about how to transition, to green building and some specific areas of sustainability, because there's a lot. And I think it's important that you also in this job searching take the opportunity to follow the people that that have gone through the path, through the same path, and then try to approach them and see how they went through. Probably we don't have the answers here, but there's always someone that went through the same, so you can always find these kind of people that approach them.
Great. And Corey, do you want to weigh in with the final words before we wrap up this party?
Maybe I'm a little biased because I'm currently underemployed, but money is a huge source of stress and anxiety. So just really make sure that you're, not spending too much if you are unemployed. Make sure you have a budget. Make sure you have a bit of a cushion, because we don't know how long this is going to last, and it's always good to know that, okay, next month and next month I'm covered. That helps me being able to look for work and network and volunteer and go outside and play squash if I know that I can pay for these things. So definitely keep an eye on what you're spending and save money, people.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and I also want to thank Corey for joining this discussion. I initially reached out not knowing what his current status was, and this really does not need to be awkward. There are hundreds and thousands of people that are underemployed or unemployed or between positions, and I'm so glad that we were able to showcase what that looks like in a positive, constructive light. So great tips, everyone. Thank you so much. We do want to share, for anyone that does need to drop off at the top of the hour, I think even one of our panelists does, don't worry, we're recording this and we'll share this afterwards. We did want to just share a couple things to keep the momentum going. So there are some more kind of public virtual events like this coming up, including one on June 25th under the Globe Series. It's on innovation pathways and transition finance towards future fit hydrocarbons. That's going to be run by the Delphi Group and Energy Futures Lab. It should be really great. And then we're going to be running another webinar in early July on featuring some of our own young founders. So if you're wanting to give up on or thinking of different ways other than just kind of searching for jobs and starting something yourself, you might want to tune into that webinar. For any of our Leading Change alumni that are on the line, we're launching what we're calling our Leading Change Hub next week, and we are running one specifically around kind of job search, career pivoting. So if you're a Leading Change alum and want to be a part of that, we do have a couple spots. Just send me an email. In our post-webinar email, we'll also share a link to a new LinkedIn group that we've just created specifically for sharing kind of early career job opportunities, internships, fellowships, things like that, specifically around sustainability. And of course, if you're not following us on all our social media channels, we post lots of great stuff and opportunities on there. So please continue to engage with us. And yeah, I want to give just a big virtual round of applause to our panelists. Also, huge thanks to the Globe Series for being such a gracious host. And of course, all of our attendees and those fantastic questions. There's a lot of content on Netflix, and you chose to be with us. And more importantly, you chose to take some time to invest in yourself and your personal growth. So please stay in touch, stay positive, and I think that's it. Globe Virtual Team, that's a wrap.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Globe, for putting this together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.